Good morning. It's 20 minutes after 10 o'clock a.m. on August 24th, 2020. Today's a very significant day for me because it is the day after the Supreme Court of Texas denied my writ of habeas corpus. And they did so in a way that was procedurally against the rules and also used it in derivative litigation that had very significant consequences. Now, I have come to learn that there is a situation whereby people who had a certain kind of authority and connection with the political realm as well as the financial sector have been allowed to purchase debt connected to people alleged to be in default, including in regards to private loans, but also by misrepresentation of what the terms of debt service are to the federal government. And they allowed for it to be used to leverage as part of other financial deals they thought that they were entitled to engage. This has been going on with me personally for years. I've attempted to address it the way I have and continue to persist and support anybody else in attempting to seek redress if they are in a similar situation. And I believe a lot more people are in this situation than anyone has informed them of and has acknowledged, and that there is public documentation of efforts to try to address it. But at the same time, part of what has been happening that I have been following in Texas and trying to report on is a specific pattern of racketeering that involves laundering and embezzlement connected to the Texas retirement system, but not exclusively the Texas retirement system, i.e., not exclusively the public pension fund base. One of the things that has been happening is this sort of schema whereby things connected to whistleblowers at independent school districts are juxtaposed with this case that was tried against Boeing in the state of Texas. And basically, what it means that I've seen is, to be succinct, is that children, including in places like their schools, but specifically places like homeless and domestic violence shelters and under the auspices of other kinds of programs, are used in the processes of R&D and product development for, among other things, weapons companies. These weapons companies also have deals connected to the alleged biomed or biotech sector. And I believe that Texas has been using its own children as well as other children that are in the state for whatever reason, including from outside of the country or from outside of the state, to develop biological weapons. This is part of what I've been attempting to expose, and this is part of what I've been attempting to get some support on. But in the process, what has also been exposed is a very comprehensive network of people that have been targeting political opposition and using a variety of means to disappear them or dispossess them of their rights so that their lives can be harvested and recharacterized in manners that are not only unconstitutional but that constitute war crimes. And so there is a variety of factors going on right now. And one of the things that is very significant and important to know is that this is not about local police and any sort of federal law enforcement it involves. Are federal law enforcement that understand the gravity of the situation and are already committed to some sort of joint operation, which already has precedent, and also understands that subjecting people to a situation where you swap their family identity or their personal identity documents out with somebody else who gets to pretend to be their father or pretend to be their grandfather so that you can commit securities fraud involving the pension and retirement system is not a tradition. This is not a traditional tactic that is allowed to be accepted as a covert action covered under any national security strategy. It's human trafficking, and it's also, depending upon what daddy wants you to do or grandpa wants you to do, extortion connected to organized criminal activity that is trying to infiltrate and abuse the sorts of protections that are provided to people in the United States military in order to do their job. Now, several years ago, there were changes to the pension system specific to awards of benefits connected to military annuities. This came around the time that there were specific kinds of benefit distinctions made in regards to health care access that correlated with bills that did not get passed, but that I allege were in some other manner either incorporated into the appropriations process or allowed to be clandestinely implemented. Specifically, there was a bill that was proposed that discussed how people in Congress were to be matched by people in the United States that were a part of the Affordable Care Act marketplace that had a comparable income. The problem is, I don't think that income was just about financial remuneration. I think by income, they also specifically meant political capital, and they also meant other kinds of intangible property that that person was either able to create and or able to access by virtue of their networks and or their own sorts of activities. And depending upon the characterization of that individual, you might even be able to assess that a equivalent income for consideration is a person that was a political opposition, but that could be used in some sort of swap or some sort of central counterparty strategy. And I believe this has been happening for a significant amount of time, and it is part of this contrived bipolarity that is allowing people to be harvested of their political capital by the opposition parties, and that the refusal of this to be exposed fully is really because there was an agreement, I believe, at some point, a competitive agreement at some point on some level to engage it, despite whatever the original party affiliation was. And the party that did not, or the parties that did not avail themselves of the fullest advantage at the time, i.e., win, don't want to reveal it. Because even if they're victimized, and even if it destroys the country, and even if it will destroy the planet, they don't want to have to be held responsible for what it meant to willingly and consciously engage in something not only unconstitutional, but unconscionable to begin with. This goes back a ways, but I actually believe this is the circumstances we're in right now. So the situation here requires people to really take, note of and understand the gravity of what we're dealing with. I've watched now 3 years in a row it flip. And it's that precise and it's that preventable. This year and what's happened this year could have been preventable. And now we're at a very serious and very significant situation. Something needs to acknowledge and do an intervention into the manners in which the Texas retirement system and the Texas judiciary, in concert with the Texas retirement system, have been disabusing their access to military benefits in order to stifle any sort of reasonable response from the citizens and residents of Texas in appropriately addressing the factors not only connected to COVID-19, but to other situations concerning safety for people in other countries. There was a natural gas pipeline explosion yesterday in Syria. They may say it's an act of terrorism, and it may well be an act of terrorism engaged by local actors. But I'm pretty sure in the next 72 hours, if not within the next 4 to 5, we're going to find exactly what was the bundled transactional process that in the course of trying to leverage something that could be an insurance payout ended up finding that specific option to execute that explosion and that sabotage of that Syrian natural gas pipeline at that time. That's how this works. And so we're here in Texas, and those of us here in Texas have seen this happen for over a year. I again repeat, I believe this is an urgent situation. Failure to respond will be addressed as appropriate. Deploying police in order to get a benchmark or a report is not acceptable. That's pension fraud. And it is also, it seems, interference in being able to actually communicate with and contact the people that actually need to be responding.